So good afternoon. So as Sandy was saying, I'm Steve Crook. This is my colleague, Brian Griffin. So we're solutions engineers for MarkLogic, the database server. So this afternoon, we're going to show you how you can go beyond business intelligence with context-enriched analytics. So I'd like to start, let me get that over here. There we go. Is that coming? Yeah, there we go. So I'd like to start with a recent report by Salesforce that talks about the data challenges presented to business leaders and analytics leaders. I'd like to concentrate on the left-hand side there. Number 2, takes too long to get insight, by way of an example. So we have a healthcare insurance provider organization in the US, and also a global pharmaceutical company. The commonality is that they both use MarkLogic to store their data, but they're also shipping that data out to a third-party analytics platform in order to do their reporting analytics. Now, there are a number of challenges with that. Number 1, of course, is that the complexity and the challenge of getting that data out of MarkLogic into that system, especially when you're dealing with complex data. Number 2, of course, is the extra cost of maintaining that third system. But more importantly, from the end user's perspective, because that data is being shipped out overnight between the two systems in batch, users are losing that ability to make real-time decisions. So here's another report. This is AWS. This is this year. And CDOs and CIOs are taking about 20% of their day just trying to enable new business with analytics and produce analytical insight for their organization. Now, of course, you could say, well, that's part of their day job. That's what they're paid to do. Well, what if we could get that down so that they could spend more time delivering extra value to their business? You will have come across the concept of big data. You've hopefully come across the idea of wide data, this notion that companies are now having to handle not just the tabular data that we've had in the past, but to be able to go beyond that and handle things like documents and network graphs, and so on. And of course, there's the volume of that data is getting more and more intense. And that's why what you find is that business intelligence tools, they're having trouble handling that data. They typically are only able to access one aspect of that data at a time. So therefore, you get a partial representation of what's going on. So another example. So let's assume for a moment that this is in a BI tool. So we've got a map of Bethesda, and there's a virus outbreak, just saying. And we've got within this grid, of course, we've got the cases involved here, and those initials there, they're just the initials of the people who have got the virus. Now that's great. You know, a BI tool can very easily render this stuff on the screen. But what happens when you want to then track the source and see how it develops over time? That's more of a challenge. But then, of course, let's say your boss comes along and says, right, well, we've got this social media data that we can integrate, or I'd like to be able to integrate into the display so that we can see who's actually spreading it. And then we can work out who the super spreaders are and lock them down. Now, again, this is really not something that you're going to be able to do with traditional tools. Let's talk about drill down. BI tools, they can do drill down into the data, but the data itself tends to be very small pieces of information, very terse. But what would happen if you wanted to go and get the entire document or the case notes related to a particular person who's contracted that virus? So not trivial or maybe even impossible with modern BI tools. So that's why Gartner are saying that data analytics leaders must bridge the gap between the analytics of today and the context-enriched analysis for decision makers to uncover unique insights. So what we need is a way of working with all the goodness within MarkLogic, all the multi-structured information, some would say multimodal, in a way that allows you to cover the breadth, or get a 360-degree view of all of the company's data, but in a way that's real-time, interactive, and dynamic, but also allows for the fact that the people who are producing those views for you can do so very, very quickly, so then the business isn't hanging around to get that in front of them. So introducing Progress MarkLogic FastTrack, or just FastTrack. So what is it? It's a toolkit. It's written in JavaScript, specifically React, so pretty much the most popular toolkit for JavaScript right now, specifically designed to work with data coming from MarkLogic. And when I say toolkit, we're talking about visualization components. So whereas MarkLogic simplifies complex data, FastTrack simplifies the visualization of that complex data. So now you can go from your big wide view down to the finest details in real time. From a developer standpoint, it's greatly reducing or rather increasing their productivity, because we've already done the hard work of writing those lower-level components, visualization components, so the developers can then spend their time concentrating on the business use case. And as you can see there, these components can be mixed and matched however you like. And in terms of customizability, every component within the toolkit is heavily customizable, both in terms of look and feel, and the fact that you can plug in your own custom utilities or custom rendering functions into those components. So if we just go through a few of those, you've got things like network graph visualizations. So your social scientists can use those. Maps, timelines, grids, loads of charts. And then the bread and butter of what MarkLogic does, the search. So you've got your search boxes, the results screens that you can customize, and of course the facets that you normally get on the left-hand side of the screen that allows you to narrow down and filter your results. Now, all these components are wrapped up in a single data access layer, and what that does is it hides the complexity of you having to make the low-level calls to MarkLogic. And then finally, within the toolkit, you've got a whole load of sample apps, one of which Brian's going to demonstrate to you, so that as a developer, you can really get up to speed with the toolkit very quickly. From a end-use perspective, yes, so now you can make your real-time decisions accurately, so that you can add value to your business. So, for example, your logistics guys can look at a map of and the timeline of that, see how shipments are going across the world, for example. Like I said, your social scientists can see the network graph and see how things interact. So, and what we're able to do, because they're general purpose components, they're not tied to any particular use case. You define the use case, so we can apply the toolkit to pretty much anything that you can throw at it. Finally, FastTrack adds or complements the MarkLogic ecosystem. So whereas you've heard this morning about Flux, that is the new, I guess, next gen really on top of MLCP and Corb and DMSDK. So that's to get data into MarkLogic. MarkLogic, of course, handles all the great abilities of multimodal data, making it available for consumption. We've curated it, we've harmonized it. And now FastTrack gives you that ability to consume that data in a visually compelling way that's easy to get in front of developers. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Brian, who's going to give you a compelling demo.
Thanks, Stephen. Great summary of what FastTrack can do. So like you said, I'm going to give a demo, and it's actually going to be a combination of two demos. Let me slide it back over. Okay. Like Stephen said, this is our very easy search application. So we've got some data sitting in MarkLogic centered around Harry Potter characters, just to give some fun backdrop on it. Here you can see a nice simple search app. You got your search bar, you got your search results, you got facets. This is some of the more interesting pieces that you can do with facets. Normally you're used to things down here where you've got checkboxes and counts and things, but there's other ways to do facets that are more visually compelling and might summarize your data a little bit better, having charts and pie charts that you can click on. So we can actually come here and click on one of these slices of the pie chart, and it acts just like any other facet could, where you can filter your data down and summarize it this way. Right? And like all of these, like Stephen said, they all work together. They all interact with that data access layer, so we're able to handle all of these clicks, handle all of this data, all of the changes very easily, low developer effort, so you can handle it all pretty quickly and easily and focus on the business problem, not how do I wire this up. Okay. So let's get started and search for a character here. We'll search for Ron. So you can see all of the different documents we have in here that mention Ron in some way, all sorted based on relevancies. We've got our facets here. We can also come and look at the data from a different direction. Right? So our social map with all of our relationships down in here. So we've got Ron here in the middle with a bunch of relationships, some travel that he's taken, an organization that he's associated with there, some other people that he's related to. So we've got, I think we've got Molly here, his mother. So we can continue to expand out on this graph and look at the relationships. We can click on these people, see who they are. And we can also see the different relationships of Molly Weasley. Parent of Ron also has Arthur. And you can see we also have this green marker here. This is actually something that we were able to create from this UI. So you probably saw me a couple of times dragging this around. We can create new relationships here. So not only does our network graph give you the ability to surface relationships that you might not have known about, but you can also surface relationships that you do know about that aren't actually in the system, and then go and create those on the fly. And add it to your data so that now it's there, now we can see it, and we can continue to use that as more data to start narrowing things down and figuring out what we're trying to find. Okay. So network graph, great. We also have the ability to look at this same data from a map. So you can see we've got points on a map, some travel that's being done, and you can see we also have a network graph in the map. So network graph of people moving from one place to another. Right? So this can give you some of that information that Stephen was talking about with locations and how that can impact things. Moving into timeline, we can do the same kind of thing here. You can see the different pieces of data and when they happened. But one thing that we were talking about that BI tools cannot do is they cannot handle all of this at once. So I've only been showing the situation from a single point of view, but we can come over and we can look at it from a from a perspective that's got a little bit of everything. So we've got our network graph, we have our map, and we have our timeline. And some of these can work where they start interacting. So you can highlight some of these and they will show up little pings on the map, so you could phase through these and see where it's moving, like the virus case that was shown in the deck. So you can start to get an idea of how these interact and how they work with each other with your data, right? So that's a big part of how the different pieces of data can come together in a single pane of glass. Right? So there's, again, like Stephen said, there's a lot of different components, and we'll go through a couple more here. So we've been showing kind of the things that differentiate from business intelligence, but we also have the ability to create reports and things like that from the data. And this data is actually interacting with the search that we've run. So we have the search, and we have our report that looks kind of like a BI report based on that search. So you can look at all the data, report these kinds of pieces of information on all of your data, or you can run that search and narrow down what your report is looking at. So if you have some interesting subset of data that you want to look at and report on, you can do that in addition to being able to do the larger data sets. And then from here, we also have the ability to build on-the-fly charts and reports. And so we can create a new one here. We can say create a bar chart on the document source. Hopefully. Or maybe the data type. So we have a bar chart on the data type. Maybe I don't like that it looks like what it looks like in a bar chart, so I can pick a pie chart here and get a different representation. But all of this is all configurable. You can handle this. It could be saved by user. It could be saved by role. And you can just build out these and use them however you see fit, enabling your analysts, your business users to look at the data the way that they need to in order to perform their function. So that pretty much covers what FastTrack can do, but I did want to show one more demonstration. This is actually one of the demonstrations that comes with the FastTrack distribution, so you'll get a copy of this, and you can look at how it works and how everything interacts. But this has another interesting capability with integrating the map and the timeline, where you can see we zoom in on the timeline and we start having pieces on the map start to fade out. You can slide the timeline around, and which ones are faded out changes as the time changes. So this is another example of how the different components can interact with each other and save state with each other. And this is probably about 10 or 15 lines of code but to bring the states together. It's pretty simple. Didn't take much time or effort to put that together. So it makes it a lot easier for your developers to build quickly and build what you need as quickly as possible. All right. So I think that's all we had to show, but yes, definitely. That was going to be the next thing, questions.
The first map you showed, I believe it was of people moving to different locations.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you said that those were triples.
It has both. So it was triples and, let me get over to it. It's got triples and geolocations associated with those records.
And do you get to decide as a developer, business owner, do you configure which predicates to use?
Yeah, you can configure how it handles it. I think this one actually says anything that has a coordinate and triples is going to show up in the map, but you can pick how it works.
So if I have two people, they have locations, point in time where they were,
Mhm.
but could I also see a relationship with someone? It's not associated coordinates?
Yeah, so I'll repeat for the recording. So we've got a question about if we have two people in a map and say they're not traveling, but they have a relationship with each other, can that relationship also be shown on this map? And the answer is yes. You can pick any 2 points on a map that have a location, and any relationship can also be shown. And I don't think it's on this one in particular, but you can also label them just like we did on the network graph. You can label those relationships if you wanted a distinction between travel and a personal relationship as well.
I can add to that. Yeah, if I can add to that, the data comes back from the search, and then you are responsible for how you interpret that data or what goes into those components. So it's it's completely configurable. I mean, frankly, you don't even have to use the data from the search. You could actually have some static data coming in. You put it into the component, and it just renders it. But you are completely in control. Yeah. Any others? Yes.
Do we need to do any configuration to make present the aggregations, like creating indices? Because I assume that when you display a pie chart with the numbers, yeah, then you probably leveraging indices.
Yes.
So upfront,
Absolutely.
know what
Yeah.
indices you have, or
So the question is, do you have to configure MarkLogic indexes? Absolutely. Yes. Yes, because say typically you can get search results back, you can get, say, Sparkle results back and so on, documents back. But for example, from a search, if you want that fasting information to come back, then clearly you've got to put in a range index on the database for those things that you want to come back in the facet results.
and regarding the search, you need to configure. So it's not. Do you need to create searches? It will be, so where do you create or define the search? It's more on the back end or with the background?
So when you the components, let's say for example, let's take a simple search application interface. So let's say you've got the search box and you've got some facets. So let's say you type into the search box, and with every key press, you're updating the what they call the context, which is handled by the data access layer. And so if you run the search, it brings back some results. Then you say you want to use the facets to filter down that information. So every click on that facet is going to update the context within the data access layer, and that's going to send another call to MarkLogic to V1 search, get the results back, and then that goes into the context, and then the context passes it on to the components, which will then render it on the screen.
I'll expand on that a little bit as well. So when you are, say, using the search box, you ask how you configure the search. So it does use V1 search on the back end. So it uses the standard MarkLogic search, which you can just hand it a query string, it does the search. That's what our text box here was doing. If the word shows up in the document, it's going to hit on that search. And then the facets, like we already said, use the indexes, which is essentially turns it into a structured query in the MarkLogic backend.
No, I was just gonna say, so V1 search, it's got excellent search options, full-line search options, that's where you go to the index settings and the facets. So it's all configured on the back end, it's not on the front end.
Yeah, that's a good summary. It is configured on the back end, but you do still have to, from the front end, send it what you're searching for, but it's parsed on the back end and handled as a regular MarkLogic search.
Regarding timelines,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to present, for example, the number of documents in the system, and you can see that, okay, the first of January was 10 documents, the second January was 12, so then you can see the history of the system. Do you have such widgets?
I don't see why you couldn't. So did you have?
Yeah. Yes, you can do that. So we talked about making calls out to V1 Search and Sparkle, making Sparkle calls. You can also hit any custom endpoint you like. So, for example, that custom endpoint could have that information in there. You bring the data back, again, puts it into the context, and then it's up to you how you render it through the components.
Okay, so you would need to write some code to render. And with the FastTrack, you are responsible for sending requests, or automated where this use case is like, I assume that you need to define the service, okay, you will return for every day the number of documents, and then you need to write the code documents per day and render and show to the end user.
Yeah, so the question is how you interact. So for things like, say, V1 Search, there's a lot of, that's a lot of that work has been done for you. And Sparkle, you have to be responsible for constructing that Sparkle query and giving it some variables or some parameters. But yeah, sure, but then if you want to go off grid and use custom endpoints, then you're going to be, you're going to be writing a little bit more code to handle that.
With a little more context to that, sorry, I happened to that sentence. So a little more context to that question, specifically about like the history of the system. There's an entire feature in MarkLogic that allows you to do point-in-time queries of past state of the system called temporal. So you would use that functionality in conjunction with this to enable to say, and that's not just how many documents there were. That could be, I want to run all of these queries as if it was a month ago. So you could then explore your whole interface as if the system was still a month ago. That could be useful for, we made a decision, and we want to understand why we made that decision, so we need all the information they had when they had it to understand that, instead of what the information we have now. But that's a different feature that would be used, I guess,
Yep.
tie this together.
So that point in time feature, it's another feature inside of the search part of MarkLogic, has some back end pieces that go along with it. You have to load the data a certain way, things like that. But it's just another parameter that you pass to the search endpoint, and that can be handled very easily within the MarkLogic search API.
And I guess it just goes to point out that this is your demo, you decide to put particular React components together a certain way. But if you wanted that timeline, you put a date field there. When they make a change that compels to do another search, you're using the value of this field to then do by temporal search back.
Yep, definitely. Great summary. Are there any other questions? Any?
What new widgets are you going to bring out?
Yep. So the next widget that's coming is a chatbot interface that will respond directly with some of the AI, RAG AI things that we're talking about mostly tomorrow. And then anything else would probably need to come from Mike, who's presenting tomorrow. So that's a great segue into it. Need to check the time again. We'll have one of our developers presenting at 9:25 tomorrow morning, doing some coding on the fly for everybody, and also talking about the future of FastTrack and what's coming next.
So how is this application available to developers? Is it a part of MarkLogic 12 or is it a separate product?
So the question was, how is this available to developers? When it is purchased, it will come as a React library that you can install using NPM. So you would install it from a tar zip file. You install it as if it was any other React library. It's not specifically associated with any MarkLogic version.
But is it available as a community?
Well, it's a separately licensable application or component really, or part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's not an open source component. It is a separately purchased piece of software that can be added on, kind of like security or advanced security or geospatial.
There's a typo on the agenda. Mike's presentation is actually at 10:25 tomorrow.
So, correction, 1025 for the developer demonstration of FastTrack.
And is there a capability to have a separate for separate users? So, for example, each user has own account where you define what the user can see, what widgets, or the ready report, and when you log in, you get what you need to see.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, is there a way to handle users and custom views? Not necessarily directly built into FastTrack, but like was said in the audience, you do have the ability to do anything that you would normally do in a website. You can, it's your website still. We just provide some tools and pieces and the interaction, so you can write up anything you want.
So it's like a framework, not application. Well,
Yeah, yes, it's a framework, it's a toolkit of pieces that you can assemble it any way that you want.
but you need to create on your own application. For example, if you want something like this, you need to write on your own.
Exactly.
Just add to that. So you'll log in, or so you're contacting, you'll be using it, and therefore contacting MarkLogic as a particular user who has a particular role. So the information you get back that's then rendered on the screen will be specific to that user according to their roles.
Okay, and is there any functionality where you can, for example, store what the configuration of the application? For example, you store, okay, that for this user I want to display this pie chart. For this user I need to display a map. So is there any configuration or that stores what needs to be displayed, or again it would be
Yeah, not explicitly in FastTrack. There's nothing that will handle that for you, but it is definitely something that can be stored in MarkLogic on a per user basis. Can be pulled back and then dynamically rendered if you wanted to handle that.
Yeah. So the way I would handle that is that you would have you'd hit a custom endpoint when you log in, and that tells you returns your configuration. You use that within your application then to determine, how that interface is configured for that particular user. Yeah, but it's not something that's that's something that's going to require you to do some work. It's not something that's purely out of the box.
Any more questions, or we can give you a few minutes back and break.
Thank you very much.